Seeing my screen. Should be your new and wonderful website.
Yep.
Is that coming through? Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Bill Olson. I'm part of the web support team here at Planetaria, and typically I come in at the end of the project to help with training, and then even more so ongoing support after the site is launched. So today is just going to be kind of a walkthrough, going through what looks like the most obvious things to me, but we can certainly stop along the way, or if there's certain areas that you want to go through, a little more depth on the website, we can look at that. Heidi may be joining us as well. Although she may be in the background, she's certainly a little more familiar with the site. So if there's questions she could answer, she might jump in, or I could certainly get an answer later. Now, it's my understanding, it looks like some of you have already been on the website. I don't know how familiar you are all with it, but I did send out some other invites today as well. Typically, it's kind of a mixed group. So that kind of dictates a little bit what we cover. Usually
I definitely have, but everyone else I think has not done anything.
Okay, yeah, great. Typically, it's very normal for a group this size. Some people may have some WordPress website experience, others may not. I try to keep things a little more broad, but obviously there's some particulars to your website that we're going to want to kind of dive into a little bit, but there's a lot to cover. And I think with that, we could probably get started. I did send out a basic agenda earlier, a little more of an outline. I don't know if you folks saw it, but let's just start with some of the basics. Apologize if you've already seen this, but I think just logging in is obviously an important thing. So hopefully you got your logins. And if you did not, check your spam. Sometimes they end up there. But once you have that, this is the dashboard area of the WordPress website. And what you see will look similar to what's on your screen, but may vary a little bit since I have essentially an admin level above that. We kind of give you access things, enough to change what you need to change, but then not to, break anything, hopefully. So yeah, starting with the dashboard, you should be logging in with this. It'll be your website name /WP-admin. There's a password reset there if you ever need to do that. But again, these things do sometimes get caught in spam. And if you do have an issue, certainly can probably help you, work through it at a later point. But once you're in your dashboard, you'll see this whole area over here. So we have things like our pages and our meetings, parks and trails, points of interest, FAQs, and essentially I'm going to be going down most of these, not all of them, as seem most obvious to me, but like I said, stop me along the way if there's a particular area you want to look at. So the first thing I like to kind of point out, and you may or may not have access to this, but let me know if you don't, is the navigation. So you'll see up here we have these drop downs with submenus. So under parks and trails, municipal parks. Up above we have City of Lacey, sponsored jobs. These are all editable. If you don't have access to that and need it, just let me know. But I do like to point this out since navigation's a pretty important thing. So within the dashboard, under appearance, and with this little flyout menus, I just open this up in another tab. These are basically all your different menus that you can update. So just like we looked at there on the screen, here's that parks and trails with these submenus, municipal parks, et cetera, et cetera. You can tell it's a submenu by this little indent here. These are all drag and drop. So if you need to change the order or move something into another area, very easy to do. And then to add, you'll see on this left area here, we have kind of our most recent things. We have the ability to search for, let's say, a particular page. And then alternatively, you have what's called a custom link. So you set that link in the link text. So that's essentially the text of that navigation item. You just hit add to menu. It would appear down at the bottom of this list. And you would just put it where it needs to be. These are kind of broken up a little bit. So like you have your main menu, your top menu. So that's like these guys here. These are probably not things you're going to be messing with much. I do like to point them out just in case you're wanting to make any of these updates. So I'm going to move on from there unless there's any questions. So essentially you have pages and posts. Posts are typically, they're very similar. They work similar way as pages, but posts are typically like a blog post, news item, things like that. I don't see anything really here except a test in your current post. So I'm honestly not sure if you're going to be adding news items or things like that. But these work very much in a similar manner. But let's take a look at the pages.
So where do the posts show up?
So I peeked earlier and I didn't see that there's a spot for them now. I imagine it's something that maybe you talked about or could be adding in the future.
Yeah. Actually,
so these are the events. Yes, I don't actually see the post here yet, but it would work pretty much in a similar manner. So it would be dynamic in that something like the home page. Every time you have a new post, it would display, similar to this, dynamically where it needs to be on the home page or whatever page. There'll probably be a blog page of some kind as well. Yeah, looking at your site, I see it's not completely developed, and Heidi did earlier point out a couple areas that we're still working on, but I think there's definitely enough to go through and learn most of what we need to today. So. Let's take a look at the pages. So this is basically your full list of pages under that dashboard. And you can kind of scroll down, look around. You could search for different items, if you need to. I've personally found it's easiest when working through the website. Just have another tab open with your live site. And as you navigate and you're logged in, you'll see this little edit page option at the top. So anytime I get to a page I want to edit, I don't necessarily have to go in and find it and work on it that way. I can just dive right in and make the edit here. So as far as the pages, I like to start with the home page because it's, it's what's up front and there's kind of some interesting things there. Essentially, there's three types of pages, I would have to say. One is similar to like this home page in that if we take a look, it uses essentially a set of a lot of these tabs and custom fields. So for instance, starting with this first one, you can see they're all broken up, these tabs for this different areas of the page. So like we have our banner, for instance. I'm just going to open this another tab so we can kind of jump back and forth and look. So the banner, like you'd expect, is this big guy here. There's that image. There's a text field, I believe, if you want to use it. There's additional copy you can put. And then in this case, we're actually using multiple slides. I don't see it sliding this second, but I'm assuming that's on load maybe. But there's that first image. There's the next one. Essentially, that whole area is just updated through these different fields here, where you can add the link, add the image, add text if you're going to be using it. Typically, we limit these to 3 or 4 at a time. So that's just kind of peeking at the first tab. And all these work kind of in a similar manner. And you may see things that look kind of like this on other pages too, where essentially all you need to do is fill in these different fields. Maybe add an image, things like that. The second type of page I would say is like more dynamic. Something like the blog page, which unfortunately we don't have a great example of now, but a page that's essentially being fed by other content. And then kind of your more generic page. Maybe this one. Let's take a quick look. where you actually use what we call the page editor. So if we actually preview this page, and I'll go into some of how these pages are edited here. I just want to give a quick overview. So essentially we have our header and our different content. That's kind of built like essentially like a word processor in some ways that you probably used to, you know, Microsoft Word or something. But we'll come back to that. I kind of went off a little bit there, but let's actually stick to the home page just so you're familiar with the different areas here. So the icon repeater text, that's these nice little icons here. So if we go look at the home page, that's these items. Essentially, it's an icon with a little nice hover effect and a link to that particular, you know, page. Those are all updated here. I think the icons are generally, I don't think you'd be changing this much, but you know, you have that option to do that if you need to. Now it gives you the ability to add additional items. I think in this particular case, you probably want to just stick to the 4. I think things are kind of set up, you know, as they need to be, but if you're wanting to swap one out, you do that within here. The image repeater tabs, I believe that's this nice little zoomy effect here for our parks and trails, or sports and fitness, other classes. You can see there's that copy, there's that link. So really easy to update these as you need to. The About tab. See this here. Got more of these image repeaters, works just like the other one. Our park partners, it looks like maybe, I'm not seeing this displaying yet. I imagine it's one of those features that would be coming, or maybe it's just turned off at the moment. But at some point, you'll have the ability, just like all these different blocks, that's what we call them, blocks kind of stacked on top of each other. You'd be able to add your different partners and their logo. You'll see a lot of these things work in a very similar manner as far as updating, essentially change the image, add the link. That's probably really common. Then the alert tab. So you'll see at the top of the page here, this is a large generic text, but if there was something of you know, importance that you need to highlight, you get this nice big red banner, the learn more button to whatever link you set. And that's all done, you know, through this tab area here. In this case, yeah, we're using an existing, looks like an existing draft of a page. So obviously that's not real content, but just so you know how it works. So that's kind of the overview of the homepage. And I mentioned some of these other items I think are maybe more dynamic, such as the upcoming events. So you didn't see a tab there, but it displays your upcoming events based on the events you add here within the dashboard. So here we have meetings and events. And right now I see we have a bunch of meetings here, but assuming there's some events in here as well somewhere, and that's what's displaying. Yeah, so there's like the Arbor Day celebration. So they're all kind of grouped together, but you'll see there's different categories for each. So if we just take a quick peek at one of these. So, and I'm kind of moving on here to the meetings and events. Is there any other questions about the home page?
Not so far.
Okay, great. So meetings and events, and I'll go into more, you know, editing pages here shortly, but since we kind of touched on it, there's a lot to cover. I just kind of throw this in here. So here's our event with our title. We set our date. Fancy date picker there. You can set a location. We have a summary area, also related documents. So this particular one actually does have an agenda. So adding an agenda to a meeting, really easy. In this case, there already is one, or if you need to add a packet or a supplemental item, you'll see this here and you would just hit add row, link label, so just the name that displays, select that file, or if it's not a file, a link, to wherever it goes. We have a spot for things like meeting presentation, actual link, should it be like a virtual meeting, which is certainly a common thing these days, spot for minutes, a few other custom things, ordinances, audio files, pretty much anything to do with your meetings or events you do within these 3 tabs here. Now also to point out, there is a category option and a commission option. So in this right area of the page, I'll kind of go into this a little bit more when we look at some other pages, but there's usually some important items in any page you go to that kind of live over here in the right column. In this case, this is a particular, Board and Parks Commission meeting. You want to make sure to check that, to categorize it properly. And then should it be some sort of event, we have things like culture, family, food, etc. Essentially just ways to sort and find them later. So keep that in mind as you are working or adding events, that you'll want to make sure that these are set correctly in the right-hand column. And as well as a featured item. So I think if we actually go to a real event, we may find a featured item there. Featured image, sorry. Yeah, so in this case, under our featured image for this particular event, that's what's going to show up like on that little home page display that we looked at earlier. So if you are adding any kind of event, I don't think this really applies for like board meetings, but for any kind of event, you got to make sure that you're using a a good image and checking this featured image area to add something. And we'll look at this a little bit later, but you'll also see that within this little description area, we can add things like carousels and other content as needed, which is more pertinent to the event type opposed to the meeting stuff, which is all pretty much within these tabs. So meeting stuff in the tabs, event kind of information would be kind of up above that in the the content area. So that's kind of the overview of meetings and events. We kind of looked at it a little bit, but I touched on images. I think probably the next thing to look at is the media library, unless there's any questions about what we looked at so far. At least one more thing about meetings, I guess, is the categories can be edited as well. I think they're pretty much all set up for you. Again, under this meetings and events, and like all these level sub items that you can look at and possibly edit. I could add a new event category if I need to, but generally you want to stick with it, with what's there, just to be consistent. And probably check with whoever you need to if you're going to be adding any kind of new category. But, so I touched on media, and we kind of saw a couple examples earlier. So like, close some of these other tabs. So like you saw when we were working on the home page, there were some spots here like for the slider, for instance, where there's an image. I'm not going to save this, but I'm going to temporarily remove it. And this is one way you would probably use this is you'll see this add image. You select that, and that pops your media library. Now, there's a couple ways to get to your media library. This is pretty common. You're within a page and you want to add an image within that page. You'll see that little add media option, or there's another way to add it as well. But when you do, it'll look like this. Essentially gives you the option to select something that maybe you already have. or to upload new files as needed. Now, when it comes to the media library, definitely star this, very important. Make sure you keep things organized. So you'll notice in this case, we have these nice folders. So we keep our board agenda, items in their respective years. Parks and Trails, there's its icons. There's its activities. You can certainly upload things, and when you do, you'll see this unorganized. Try to avoid that. So if you click that, now you suddenly have that option when you're uploading to decide where it's going to go. Now, obviously, not everything is going to necessarily have a place, but as organized as you can be, it'll just make your life a lot more simple later when you're dealing with finding or and adding images. Definitely keep this folder structure in mind. Here I have the option to pull something off my computer. But when you're looking at the library also, you'll notice there's an option for new folders. So if there's an area that you feel like maybe needs its own set of folders, you can certainly do that. So this is just an example. So let's just say I wanted to, I could choose that image. There I go. I picked one from the existing media library. Note that it has alt text. So this is for screen readers, ADA compliance. Pretty important for most any image where there's, content that somebody with disability, might want to know what's there. So when they're using like a text screen reader, if they're not seeing this, you want to have these basic descriptions. You don't need to go crazy, but pretty much anytime you're adding a new image, or you even come across one in here that you feel like needs it, add this alt text. It's definitely best practice to do so. There was a couple other things I want to show you regarding media. So here's the other way to get to things, just from the dashboard itself. You can certainly add new, but you can just go into the library this way. Maybe you're just trying to find a particular image or a document. So yeah, images and documents all live here. Another important thing is if I go to check out this particular document, you will see the link to it. File URL. So if you're wanting to share that particular document, let's say in an email or even on a web page, possibly, this URL link will take you to that document directly to your website. So let's just say I copied that, put it in another tab. Now I have that PDF that was that I wanted to share. There are a few other options within these media items. I saw one earlier. Let me just pull it up here. And that is essentially indexing particular types of documents. So if I could find where it was. Looking for an example, sorry. I might have to bug Heidi here, but do we have an indexed document page that we're using for this website? It may have been your city site that I saw that was using this option.
I don't think it's done yet.
Okay, but if you look at any document, you scroll down a little bit, you'll see this index for library. This is just essentially a way to dynamically display it on a particular page. So let's just say you have this dynamic page of documents, and I don't have to go to that page and add it. I just check this little box within the actual media item, index for library. Yeah, I don't see publication type set up yet, but just something to keep in mind. It sounds like maybe you're not using these quite yet. But
it's something that's come up recently for the concept of knowledge base, but it's more evolved on the city site.
Okay, got it. All right, so that's really, I think, the basics of the media library. Is there anything I could explain a little more there? So yeah, we looked at meetings and events. We looked at some pages. I'm going to go into basically how to edit pages a little bit more further on. Forms. I don't know, this was actually on my list of items I sent you, but this is probably a pretty important area to work on. This is where your forms live, as you would expect. Probably not something you would necessarily be editing yourself. Probably have a particular person, with you guys that might work on these, but these are existing forms that we have. So our contact form, a reservation inquiry, a museum tour.
Sorry, I looked away for a moment. How did we get here?
Oh, sure. Right under media, you should see forms.
Oh, okay, thank
Let me
you.
know if you're not. There may be a permissions thing, because as important as forms are, you don't necessarily want everyone to necessarily go in, but obviously the entries and some of these other settings could be pretty important. So in this case, we see there's 8 entries for this particular one. So if we just take a quick look, these are probably some tests, I'm guessing, or spam. Anybody found it yet? But this is how you would find those submissions. And within the form itself are some pretty important settings as well. So things like confirmations, notifications. So notification is when somebody sends that, fills out that form and hits send, who does that go to? Right now, it's probably just set up as kind of a basic, the admin of the site, which is us. But if there's a particular person within your organization that should be receiving, notification when somebody submits, this is where you would do that, or you could ask us to do it, or maybe you have somebody there that's going to be in charge.
Okay, that explains why I couldn't go in and review my forms like I was supposed to. I don't have that access.
Okay. If you want to shoot me an email when we're done, we could look into maybe expanding access a little bit. But yeah, obviously some people are going to need this, others maybe not so much. Confirmations, this is really just something you would set up, when you're setting up the form. This is what goes back to that person, after they submit, that site visitor. Thanks for contacting us. We'll be in touch. Kind of what you would expect. Some other settings as well, such as your form title, description. This actually could go pretty deep, and if at some point you do want to, or you have somebody there that wants to know more about setting up these forms, we could do that. But I think for today's purposes, I think we've kind of covered the basics of where forms live, how you could see the entries, and then a couple of the more important settings. Import, export, that actually could be an important one as well. You can export, that form data to something like a CSV that you could use, with a newsletter service or something like that. If I want to export that data, so now I have that option as well. So that's kind of the quick and dirty rundown of the forms. And yeah, we'll make sure that if you need access, we'll make sure you have that. And definitely could go into that in more detail later in case there are things you need to change or want to add a new form or anything like that. Pages, like I said, I think I'm going to wait till a little further to the end to maybe go into that, but maybe look at some of these other dashboard items as well, before then. So parks and trails, points of interest, facilities, these all kind of work in a similar manner, I believe. Essentially, there's something that you fill out here and dynamically displays on a page, as needed. Now, if I understand correctly, I don't think we actually have this one set up yet. So for instance, I think parks and trails, these at some point, let's just double check here. Oh, there's some here. So here's our municipal parks. The page from the front end of things. And this is where you edit them. So if I look for, let's say, depot, See if our search is set up. So I'm guessing this Depot Park. We have this nice little map here. We have this the name, the location, we'll learn more, the different amenities. These are all edited from within this parks and trail area. So within that, we kind of have our sub options. So whether it's a rental type or facility, the facility type, you can see those here. So whether it's community park or the trail, whatnot, let's just take a quick look at one of these. So just looking at the Depot Park, which we just saw, which I said again displays dynamically on that page. These are built within these custom tabs here. So here's our overview. It's like we don't have history for this particular one. Essentially options, as you need it. You could add related parks as well. Location alerts. I'm not super familiar with that. But just looking at the overview, I think this is all pretty self-explanatory. There's that content. And then right below that, we have our gallery. We have the option to add to the gallery. We have our hours. And then lastly, pretty important, is the actual map address. So this is what drops that pin where it needs to be when people do view it or search it. And I guess the alternative method here is using what's called a KMZ file. Essentially, that's just a map location. It's probably not something you would readily have, but probably something we added for you, I'm assuming. But the short of it is that's your location area here. Our featured image. So I think the featured image is, let's just hit learn more. It's probably what shows up here next to the map. There's that description information that we saw earlier. There's the hours. So when you edit this, it both displays on its own page here, but then it also populates this municipal parks page, these page items as well. Just clear that. And then you have these nice little sort options. So whether you're looking for basketball court or baseball court, the different types of event areas. It's a really nice, easy, smooth way, for your visitor to find them. But then we also make it pretty easy to, update those items at the same time. You'll see here to the right, as I said before, a lot of times you're working on different page content. Check the right column for the different options. So these are things you need to set, so it comes up, with those searches. So in this case, event area, event building, picnic shelter. It's like community park is the facility type. Here's those amenities. So those are those little icons that we saw. And then lastly, that feature image. So yeah, adding these super easy. Yeah, was there anything more you want to look at regarding these?
I'm good. Haven't heard from anyone else, so I don't know, but
Yeah,
I'm good.
Same.
okay.
Good.
Yeah, and then Heidi, feel free to jump in if you see I've missed something. Heidi's a little more familiar than I am with this particular website, but I've certainly poked around enough, and I work on a lot of websites. So yeah, everything looks good here. So parks and trails. I think points of interest would work in a similar manner. Let's just take a quick look. So we have a point of interest type. So in these cases, museums, other services, hit edit. But if you're ever curious about something, yeah, just now that you have admin access, for those who didn't already, you can just dive in and kind of look at another example of something that's already there. So this one's pretty basic, obviously. Maybe some more content to add later. We don't have a featured image here yet too. I think this is one of those areas that's kind of in the works. But again, I go to the right column. Here's our point of interest type. museum, other services, but work in the same manner as far as like adding, content, whether, be the description or maybe you want to add images, things like that. I'll jump back to FAQs, but I think facilities are going to work also in a very, very similar way. So it's going to have our type. There's the add new option. And again, it's just look at an existing item. If you're not quite sure how it should look, kind of point you, they'll generally point you to what you need. It looks like we're actually still working on these ones as far as more detail. Yeah, so this one kind of has a nice image. And some other nice page content options. I'll be going through these here shortly. You can see this one's built out a little more robustly. So let's take a look at it. Preview in a new tab. Just waiting for it to load here. Kind of see we have a lot more content on this particular page. So again, those all kind of work in a similar manner, but obviously there's some differences too. Like I said, I think we're still connecting some of these items, but just from the front end. So there's your facilities, there's your parks. Just see what's under municipal parks. So yeah, there's that filter. Here's our events. Again, we saw these first few on the home page that display. This is our events page. Kind of a similar type of filter with the category and date range and search option. This is what we looked at earlier within the meetings and events. So I don't think I showed you the front end, but yeah, this is what that looks like. This has this nice little slider going on here, and we'll look at how some of these pages are built here shortly, as far as like sliders and image boxes, things like that. In fact, we're almost there. So I think FAQs, pretty self-explanatory. These are your frequently asked questions, organized, within this area here. So I was just looking for your FAQ link. Wasn't finding it right off the bat. Let's look at a particular item. So there's your FAQ. Where can I find registration forms, etc. And there's essentially your answer. That's where you find it. So if I go to the FAQ page itself, oops, I think that must be in the works, I'm gonna have to say. So yeah, when the FAQ is fully implemented, those items will show up kind of like you would expect. Just edited through this area here. FAQ topics, and we have sports, community, rentals. Here's these different items. Again, very similar to some of the other areas we looked at. Categories, that's Good way to differentiate things, sort things, organize, find. So we have those set up. So we kind of went through what parks and trails, points of interest, facilities, all kind of work in a similar manner. I think the next thing I was going to look at is just kind of how some of these pages are built using our page editor, because that's definitely an area that some people maybe haven't worked with before. There's a lot of options there. So if we go to our pages, pretty much what you'd expect. Here's all these wonderful pages you folks have built. And within that, let's see if we can find it here. I was looking for a particular page, something called generic interior page. This is an excellent reference for you and kind of what I'm going to use today to show you how some of these page edits are made. So this is where essentially we use a variety of the different blocks. Blocks are essentially the content that's stacked on one another. So a header would be on top of the paragraph, and maybe below that is some images. But really to know what I'm talking about, I just recommend kind of diving in and definitely taking a look at this yourself as well, maybe when we're done. Now from the back end, sometimes it's kind of a lot to take in, a lot to look at. But if you look at the front end, open our little preview option here. Maybe before I go too far into that, while we're looking at the pages, some important areas to be aware of. So you'll see here in this right column, and again, this is where a lot of different options are going to live. We have block options, page options. This is definitely your most common, would be your visibility. So when you're creating a new page, for instance, you might want it to be in draft. So if I want to turn this page into a draft, I could do that. And then when you are ready to publish it, you see this big publish button right up top here. So when it's in draft, essentially you can look at it as an admin, but it's not going to be found or seen by any of the public on the front end of things. There's also the publish date. So if you're wanting to back date or maybe publish something in the future, you could choose that date as well. You decide you don't need it, you can just throw it in the trash. So that's an option as well. And again, just to point it out again, because this is used quite a bit, is featured image. And then the permalink. So permalink is essentially just the URL where it lives. So when you have a page and maybe you want to share it, you just come down to this permalink and you could copy and share that particular link. Also very handy and good to know about are revisions. So within the page, there's undo options. But let's say you published days before and you realize something was wrong. Essentially gives you the option to go back in time and restore a previous version. Now, it doesn't look super user-friendly from this point of view, but I think that doesn't really matter. You just know that what you did yesterday is what you want to go back to. You can kind of tell if you know a little HTML, kind of what that content is. Green essentially means it was added. Red means something was removed. And you have that plus and minus as well. So you have the option to go back in time and then restore a particular version of a page. So don't ever feel like you're building a page that if you make a mistake, you can certainly go back and restore an earlier version, or even, just while you're working on a page, you make a mistake. There's a nice little undo option. So whoops, actually, I don't have to add that S. I just use the Command Z button, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Undo. You just kind of go back, that way as well. So really, publish, draft, publish date, revisions, Template, generally you probably can ignore this. Probably any pages you're dealing with will probably be default, but there are different essentially templates you can use, for a particular page. It's probably something to go into at a later point if you need to know more. But yeah, the slug, revisions, featured items. So those are kind of your main page options you definitely want to be aware of as you're creating and working on pages. So here's that generic page. You see it looks a lot better on the front end. So we have this content up here. We have this nice little slider. We have a bit of a list. We have this cool graphic with the circle cropping, documents, adding documents. Have a nice way to do that. Here I can tell it's a PDF. Another way to display content, have a nice big image with this text beside it. Definitely a common thing. A full width image or video. Text cards, definitely very useful. So these really, it's kind of up to you, and maybe just use the existing content to kind of see what we've done. But these are all just good options for when you're adding content to a page, and you don't just want a big long page with a bunch of text and pictures stacked on top of each other. You have all these great options for things like this image and text card variation. Things like these little buttons. Another popular thing here, these image with the text and a link. The image grid. I'm not sure if you're using that or not, but typically you'd use this for like maybe your board members or your staff members if you had a page like that. You can kind of utilize it for other things too, but that's kind of our example. Nice image carousel with this arrow that pops through it. This little how-to guide where essentially we number each of these items. I know I'm going through a lot here. That's kind of why I mentioned, coming back to this page and just taking a look, or when you come, look at any page on the website and hit edit, you'll see some of these different examples that are there. So a button list, accordions, definitely a great way for, when you have a lot of different content. You could, have it pretty much stacked on the page like that. So people just need to open up, that particular item they're wanting more information. Tabs also good. Instead of one big long page, you just break it into these nice tabs. You do it that way. You'll see like in this particular tab, this tab has an image. This uses a timeline. And again, these are all called blocks. So this is the accordion block, the button list block. So definitely a term to get familiar with. And as I said, just basically they're content stacked on top of each other. But there's a lot of different options as far as what you're going to display. So yeah, like here we have this contact cards, so that could definitely be useful. And so that's what it looks like on the front end. And I'll just kind of, may not have to go through every one of these. I'm going to go through kind of the main ones, and if there's a particular one you want to look at closer, just let me know. So here I am back in that edit area. I like to use this list view here. So if I click that, essentially I see all those different blocks in a little more detail. So if I wanted to jump to a particular group, the grouping essentially is just a wrap around a set of blocks. It kind of gives you some options like color backgrounds. So for instance, and again, I mentioned this earlier, each block is going to have its own set of options. This particular group has this special class called gray. And if I go down the page, I can find that particular block. What was it called? Around the accordion list. Well, it might be hard to see on your screen, but essentially you have the option to put a color or like a custom kind of graphic behind something. Just kind of a way to break up the page. we could get you a list of what the different ones are, or like I said, you can come back and take a look at, this example. So like button list, let's just take a look at that group. We go to our block options and advance. We have this set here as blue. So blue gives you this nice kind of interesting background here. So a lot more visually appealing than just a white background. A good way to kind of break up content if you're stacking a bit on a particular page. But within each block, you'll kind of have these different options, and group is really handy in that regard, in that you wrap other blocks with it. So for instance, that block uses a heading and a button list. So like if we just jump up to the top and kind of take it from there. So any basic page, you'll probably start with something like a paragraph. That's what we have here. And you'll see when I have that selected, we have a few nice little options like alignment. I will do align left or right, bold, kind of the things that you would expect within a page editor. Setting links, that's what this little guy here is. So I want to set a link. If it's going to an external page, we'd want to probably open it in a new tab so people do not leave your website. And again, these are just some of the kind of more basic paragraph options. Again, kind of the things you would expect, with a text editor. So at the most basic level, you're going to be using a heading and a paragraph. That's, some pages maybe that's all they have. And secondarily, ideally, hopefully you're adding an image, because the image just makes a page look a lot nicer. So this particular page, uses some different image options. And adding items really easy. So if at the end of a paragraph, if I just hit return, it says type or choose a block type. If I just start typing away, I can just type another paragraph. Or if I hit this add block option, now I have access to essentially the full set of different blocks we can use. So paragraph, again, heading, your most basic. I could search for things. It will show essentially your most recent items here. You could search for things like, maybe tab, table, but also useful and especially as you're learning, just hit browse all. And now you have all these different blocks you could use, more than you probably ever will. But we have a lot of different examples on this page, but some of the more common ones would be like the advanced accordion, button. We'll look at some of these examples just as I go down here. Media, so just basically adding a really simple basic image. We have this gallery option, media and text. That's just basically an image with text alongside it, really easy. Things like buttons, columns, which could also be a really nice way to organize things. Some more custom things like widgets, even custom HTML, if you're familiar with HTML and want to work with it. Embeds such as like YouTube links, Twitter, etc. Ton of different options here. So you can look and you can decide what you want to use. But I would say kind of use our existing content as a guideline as far as what works, and you'll be all right. So just look at this particular block. Let's just take a look. This is our slideshow block. It's really not much to it. You just simply want to add items, hit add to gallery, and then kind of like we saw before, now I have the option to either choose something that from the existing library. I just added an item, and I can remove it. Just an easy way to add items. It's like that. Kind of going down the page, so a little more custom. This is essentially just a paragraph. Again, I like to open this guy up here. It helps me navigate when you have a page with a lot of content like this. Also, moving these really easy. So let's say, for instance, any block you go to, you're going to see options on the right. Then these might change a little bit up here. There are some kind of universal things. So if I want to move this paragraph down the page, just hit that arrow. Really easy to move it around. You also could drag and drop it. That's a little more, I would say, difficult sometimes, just dragging down a page with this much content on it. Yeah, I didn't like that. There's a lot of content. But essentially that arrow option is definitely a good thing to do and to know about. Here I am using the undo button. And again, you'll see this, these are all within a group. And I don't think we're actually using anything particular. Groups are good for, yeah, essentially just, as the name would imply, just grouping together, a block of different, content. You could do things like a background if you want, like we saw before, the background color. Or sometimes it'll affect the alignment, whether it kind of groups up in the middle or maybe spreads out all the way. Other blocks to look at. So this is just a basic image block, but you have these different styles you can use. So again, these just change depending on the different block. So default would just be your classic rectangle. You have a nice little round if you want to do it. There's that ever important alt text. You have some sizing options. So you could pick a good size image, something that's not going to be pixelated. But then you kind of have the option if you want to tweak that particular size of that image, within the page. And if you're really specific about it, you could even set the exact pixel width and height. A lot of times you can kind of ignore a lot of what's here. But if you're curious or there is something that you want access to, just take a look at the different block options as you go through them. So here's our list. So for instance, our list, let's see here. So see what options we might actually have for the list item. I guess you could add numbering, numbers here if you'd like. Even reverse them. I'm not sure why you would do that, but you could do that. Going down the page a little bit more. This is a nice one, resource list. This definitely could be important as you're building a page and you're adding things like, downloads or links, especially if you have like a multitude of them. We're only using 2 here, but this could be 2, it could be 10. This is the resource list. It gives you a little option here, full width, half width. Choose whether it's a PDF or a link or a Word doc or Excel doc. That just sets this little icon here. So this one is a link, that one's a PDF. The document itself, of course. So again, this works just like everything else. There's our media library. You can delete or add items here, add file. Say I wanted to use that instead, hit select. Now there's that option. I want to add more items, just hit that little add row, and then now you can add as many as you need to. Yeah, just a nice way to display and offer up something like this, downloads, or a link. Or for a link, you would obviously not use the image. But you come down here, hit edit. And here we're just using the we're not going anywhere, but this could be Google. It could be any page you want. And again, if it's an external website you're linking to, use this open link in new tab. That way they don't completely leave your website. There's also, when you're adding items, let's see, it actually gives me the choice of selecting things within my different pages. I could search for existing pages. So yeah. Media and text, again, this is a pretty common one to keep in mind. On the back end, it doesn't look so pretty, but when you go to the front end, you know, looks really pretty slick. So in this case, we have it grouped with this nice background color. We have our section, you know, our header, content, nice little button, and the image alongside it. So and this with this, you can swap what side it goes on. So maybe if you had a few of these on a page, it's kind of nice to alternate maybe in between, just kind of breaks things up, you know, visually. So yeah, there's the image on one side and then the text on the other. I say text, it's actually blocks, more blocks, blocks within blocks. So in this particular case, we have our, you know, regular paragraph, and then we also have this button block as well. So another important block to be aware of, buttons. Nice way to kind of draw attention to, you know, a call to action. And again, just another block to use. Editing, you know, just like you'd expect, pretty straightforward. These colors and whatnot, fonts, all that is kind of set already. You don't really need to mess. You know, it has this hover effect and, you know, that particular color. You'll see the options under here, these block options. So there are things you could do here. I would say generally though, you don't need to change the radius. You don't need to change the color. Those are already set within our style sheet, and you want to be consistent. You don't really want different buttons being different colors generally. But again, just more options. Buttons, definitely very useful. Going down the page, nice full width image. So it gives you the option whether you want to go full or part way across. Here's where you can select, you know, what that particular image would be. I'm assuming that if we were so inclined, we could actually choose a video if we wanted, but we're using an image. Text cards, also pretty popular, and I would recommend using these when appropriate. It's basically our little image with the copy there. Pretty self-explanatory. You could go 2 or 4 across or 3. There's usually a few different little options within each block besides what you might see over here. You'll sometimes see additional options, you know, pretty apparently, to do things like set how far it goes across the screen or how many of those items go across, you know, one row. So yeah, in this case, we're going left aligned, 3 across. Again, image, you know, header copy. There's a little call to action for the button. I wanted to add an additional one. I could do that here. If I were to do that, I would probably want just one row, so I would just go 4 across. I think you probably get the idea. Icons, buttons. Again, select that particular icon image. So like, I'm guessing, hopefully these are probably not something you would necessarily add yourself because, you know, you need an icon that works. But I thought we might have some here. Yeah, so we have an icon folder. So if there is a particular icon you want to use, yeah, we have this nice little library here. Most of those are being used in other ways, but lets you choose that icon, lets you choose the link or document, image buttons, that kind of nice little zoom effect, another popular option. I'm not sure you folks are using these, but these are definitely good for, you know, staff pages, things like that.
I'll be using them definitely.
Okay, great. So yeah, as you can see here, it kind of keeps it concise here, and then instead of one big long page, you just hit that little plus mark, and then you get the information for that particular person. And all those are, again, this is just another block, but you know, a lot of different options here. Title, and you could kind of tweak these as you need to, but yeah, first name, last name would make sense, job title, and then that area that opens, it's under this expanded, content area. We're not using it, but there's kind of a subhead option. There's that copy, there's that phone number. If you're adding a link maybe to, I don't know, a particular page for that person, you have that option here. I don't think we're actually using buttons in this example, but you can see what's there and then kind of just make use of it as you will. These are all just, same thing, add an item, pretty easy. Most of these work the same way too. It's like you'll see this little plus sign hover when you hover over that area where, I can remove that item, here, remove it. Image carousel kind of works a lot like you think it would. How to, it just uses like those nice little, set of numbers, for spelling out, content. So there's that step number. Gives you the option of a letter if you'd rather use that. And just lays it out. So these just save you a lot of time, like as far as design wise, and keeps things very consistent. When different staff adding, content, some websites start to look really, they kind of diverge as far as style and whatnot, but these blocks really give you the option to both organize content and then just, consistently display it, in a really easy to digest way for your site visitors. So, and again, it's a lot of options here. Button list, similar manner, label, link, add items. Like you'd expect, accordions, I'd say that's a pretty useful one as well. So that's an accordion item. That's what you see, up top. That's this. Someone clicks it, it opens up. You either have that collapsed initially or not. So when I say collapsed, I mean just when someone comes to the page, either looks like this, or a lot of times people would have the first tab maybe already open. It's just kind of a entry to the page or the different content. So just kind of gives you that option here. And again, you'll see a lot of different things under this block area. Generally, a lot you won't use, but keep an eye out. There are some good options here. That would be one of them. Collapsing that initially can be just make things a little tighter. Tabs. So within the first tab, we have our map. There's our timeline. You see if I click within each one of these, the content below it kind of switches to what's going to be inside that particular tab. And again, these are essentially within that tab is a block or multiple blocks. So like in this case, we're using a paragraph and then a timeline. That's what you're seeing here. This page is definitely good to keep in mind and come back to, as you need to. Timeline. I'm not sure you folks are using this or not, but something like your, history would be here. And then contact cards, just a nice kind of concise way to display things like phone numbers and whatnot. So there's an option here for an address. If you were to want to include that as well. In this case, we're just doing a name and these fields here.
We do have a beautiful history timeline, and I've been editing it with abandon.
Oh, good. Where is that?
It's under Lacey Museum.
Okay.
To the right, all the way to the right.
Ah, there we go.
And then learn about Lacey's history. And then scroll down.
Oh, great. Yeah. So you've obviously been working with a lot of these blocks already. So probably a lot of this you already know, but I know for some folks that haven't seen this, it can all seem a little overwhelming. So it's good you have somebody with experience there to also help you talk through it. But yeah, this looks great. have you found these pretty easy to work with? It sounds like, I mean, looks like you obviously built a
Yeah.
nice looking page. Yeah, okay.
Heidi built a nice looking page, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just sometimes when you're like, I know I should be able to do this and you can't figure out where the thing is. That's usually what it is.
Yeah, I think that comes with experience for sure. And again, having this page to fall back on is good. And that's actually, that's it for the examples I have on this page. And of course, I mean, you go to different pages, you're going to see, you know, different examples of some of these.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the generic page was in there, so that's helpful.
Yeah, so this is pretty, this one, here we go. This page is a lot more basic, but it has a nice button and whatnot. But as you can see, there's a lot of different options. I'm gonna leave this unless there's any blocks somebody wants to dive into. I know I've been kind of going over a lot here.
I'm okay. What about anybody else?
All right, so I think we're good there. And again, yeah, really just experience, dive in. You could, if you go to any of these pages, you can duplicate it. You could duplicate a
Oh.
draft and play around with it,
Yeah.
and tweak it that way, or maybe you're just a little uncomfortable on editing, a page that's already live. You kind of want to see how it might look. You could, duplicate that page and just, keep it in draft. So you see when I duplicate a page, it is draft by default.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I want to, just play around with a particular page, I can always duplicate it and make my edits there, and then copy those back, to the other
That's
page.
good to know.
But again, yeah, test page. Looks like that's there too. That's really most of what I had on my list here. Is there any areas you want to look at closer? If Heidi's still there, I don't know if you want to jump in and go cover anything. I kept things kind of generic. I mean, like I said, we're actually almost out of time, and that was as quick as I can go through it.
I'm just here to answer any questions that would fall specific to the site that aren't, falling under the generic instruction, but I think that mostly falls under questions. So
Yes, like I said, that's kind of what I had here. I hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions, now's the time, or you can certainly follow up with myself or Heidi. If there's something that comes up. I know you're still kind of finishing this out, but at some point when there's a support request or you just need some assistance, I'm here for that. I'm sure you guys will find out more about how that all works, as you actually launch, but we have a support portal that essentially you can send a support ticket and it goes to our staff, and we set a priority, and you'll find out more about that as this actually goes live. But
Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
well, you're very welcome. I appreciate your time here. And again, if something else you want to cover or I can answer, just let me know.
Okay.
I know it's kind of a lot to go over in one sitting sometimes, but
yeah, it's good to get the overview, get people familiar with it.
yeah, and I'm sure some of you probably knew a lot of this already, so thanks for bearing with me. But yeah, and then for those folks that never seen it, it's probably a lot. So
I've never seen it, so it was good for me at least to learn the basics.
I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, well, thank you very much, and you folks have a wonderful weekend. And
Thanks so much, you too.
We'll all be in touch.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right, take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.